Oh my God, there's a whole lot of people online.
A lot of people online?
Yes.
You're kidding me.
That's Danny's table. And whoops. And Alexi's just kicked over the bottle of whiskey. My name is Sylvia, for those of you who don't know me. And Danny and I worked at the SABC initially together and then became really good friends over many, many years. And I'm going to try and sort of coordinate this event.
Hi, everybody. It's Jane Lippman. Hi. Hello. Well, I first worked with Danny in 1990 during the open standoff. And I'll say more about that later, but everybody's just going to start introducing themselves first. Okay, and Amina?
Hello, can you see me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hi, evening. This is Amina Frenzy. I worked with Dan at the SABC, but originally we met in Toronto, Canada. So it's absolutely delightful that we can pay a tribute to this wonderful, wonderful human being. Thanks very much.
Angie?
Hello, my name's Angie Kaplianis. I'm from SABC News. I've been there for 30 plus years. I didn't know Danny personally, but I knew another crop of what I call CBCers from Canada who were absolutely instrumental in transforming the SABC, the South African apartheid broadcaster turned democratic broadcaster, and through Danny, paying tribute to everyone who was instrumental. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Alexi. I never knew Dan. I'm Jane's partner, and I've heard over the years, partner of 9 years over the years, Dan's name has come up frequently and sounded like a wonderful man. And I'm just intrigued by all the stories that Jane tells me about Dan.
Maybe people want to introduce themselves.
I think Basil's at the door.
Okay, I'll go get Basil.
I can do it.
Okay, so I'm going to just start with asking everybody online to introduce themselves, going from what I can see on my screen. So I can see Kristen. If Kristen could do an introduction.
Okay, I'm here.
Here we go.
Hi, I'm Kristen. That's my uncle. He's my uncle on my mom's side, Linda and Marie. They're all my aunt, my sister, my mother, and my auntie. I'm the oldest of all his nieces and nephews.
Thank you, Kristen. Next up that I can see is Hamelin.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Sylvia. So wonderful to see all your faces, even though it's at a sad time. I've known Dan for so many years, and started out with I first met Dan at the local station in CBC Ottawa. That's how I first met Dan, and then later on through the program that CBC had for the program that Cynthia was involved with, I got to know Dan. So we both share a love of cycling, which we never did get to do together, but I'll always remember him for that and other things as well. Very soulful man.
Thanks, Hamelin. John Mattison, I can see next.
Hello, everyone. Well, I was in South Africa in the early 90s, and I went over to Canada to set up to meet the CBC people and set up the arrangement to get Canadian trainers out to South Africa before the elections. And I heard about Dan at that time, and of course later met him. And when he came out and he trained our people, I always heard people really loved Dan, and he came back and back, and he I think grew to love us too.
Great. Okay, I'm struggling a bit with my Elizabeth Saka, I think.
Saka, that's right. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Saka. I'm a friend of Dan's. We met at the food bank during the Oka crisis. This was an area that was sort of halfway into the red zone, and worried mostly about what was happening and what was happening to his brother, who was inside of the treatment center.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Cynthia?
Okay.
Cynthia, you're on mute, I think.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sylvia. I just wanted to say to Dan's family, my deepest sympathy to you all. I never met you, but I knew about you through emails and conversations with Dan. One of the main roles that Dan played in my life was as a conscience. When I was feeling cowardly about saying what I really thought or being my real self, Dan would find a way to push me. And when I was feeling that, I didn't understand what he was going through, or maybe he didn't understand my life as a Black woman, and the connections between us, and he would say, we were always brother and sister, even when we didn't know it. And that just meant a great deal to me. It's the first time I'm talking about Dan since I got the news of his death, other than to hug Hamlin, and I won't say much more. So bear with me. I won't say anything more. I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Okay, I cannot see. There's the next person I can see on my screen is Thaioronióhte Dan. Sorry for my pronunciation.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Thaioronióhte Dan. I'm oops, my camera working. So the Dan is my uncle, and my sister is the Kristen. I was nice to meet you all.
Thank you for introducing. Kristen, we have done Marie D.
Sego. My name is Kasanahale Marie David. I'm Dan's sister, one of his youngest sisters, second youngest. The youngest is sitting next to me off camera. I think one of the things about Dan and his connection to South Africa was how similar the countries were, like with residential school and apartheid, and how those two were very similar in their treatment of the indigenous South African people, reservation systems and apartheid. So I can understand the connection there, but it grew so much deeper for Dan over the years, and he left a part of his heart there. So it's so touching for all of you to be gathering today in his honor. And I say nyawa from the family to all of you. We send you our love and support as well, because you're hurting as well. Sonia.
I could, I guess, introduce myself.
Thank you.
My name's Jacob, or Ganawayan Dukri. I'm Dan's nephew. And for me, this is pretty awesome, like the remembering him. And because I think he was a very humble man. I mean, he did a lot of things in this world that when we talked, he was very down to earth, and he was not one to brag about his accomplishments, but he was very proud of what he did. And I know for me, the big thing in my life with him, he got me into cycling as well. Remember when I was young, he took me on a ride around the mountain back in Ganassadage, and it was the first time I ever tasted a wine cooler. And it was like he was the cool uncle that, you know, would show me new things and really expanded the horizon beyond the reserve, and to show me the bigger world. Yeah, he would show me the bigger world. And appreciation for Hawaiian shirts. I used to tease him that he looked like Tom Selleck with his Hawaiian shirts. And so what I really loved about him was that, you know, he was really much a someone that opened up not just food wise, but the books, the just the world to me. And I owe him a lot for that, to who I became as an adult. And that's all I have to say.
Gangans, thank you. Thank you so much. Is there anybody else online before we go back to the room?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Gawiziahne Albany. It was my great uncle on my mother's side. Kristen's my mother. And I mean, I moved to Ganassadage, I don't know, I think 15 years ago now. And
Oh dear.
No, it's just frozen.
Oh, okay.
and I'm very lucky to have had an uncle like him to really show me that there's more to this world than the reservation, and that he also shows me, you know, you never stop fighting, to always be a warrior. And he was a warrior to the very end. So thank you. And yeah, that's all.
Hi, my name is Basil, and I'm celebrating your wonderful uncle, nephew, brother. I'm not sure now that I hear that the Dan's family is here. I'm very touched by that, because I think I met so many of you because I spent some time in Montreal. I can't remember, it's many moons ago, and Danny drove all the way from Toronto, and he came to Montreal to come and watch me work, and took me, and we met so many of you, including your dad, that I know. And then I spent a good few weeks getting very close to Joe as well. So hearing all your names and voices, I feel much closer to you. And I'm reminded that I spent quite a bit of time, of course, with Danny in South Africa, and I've got many stories to share of his time here. I, of course, met him through a group of crazy journalists. I'm not a journalist, but Danny used to love my stories because they were as wild as the journalists. And so, yes, we got very close while he was here, and spending time. And Danny even convinced me to go with him to the station in Winnipeg, the coldest place I've ever been to, ever. But then we also spent a summer there, which was completely different, and the people were different. So I share a lot of fond memories with you and your dad. And ironically, you know, I think I told the story to Dan when your dad died. Baba Louis, when he passed on, I had a dream of him on the very day that, and Danny described it as the very hour he left this world. And I was in a remote place in a very strange hotel room, and I called Dan and he said, you know, that's about around the time my dad passed on. So he must have been traveling already. And I'm so happy for that. So I say hello to you, and I'm very honored to be here tonight.
Thank you, Basil. So in the meantime, we have started to burn some African sage, which we call mpepu. And later on, we'll do a little bit of a fire ceremony. But what we're going to do for the rest of this is just to give people an opportunity to talk about Dan and to share stories like we've already started doing. And I just want to add to what people have already said, and that is to say a huge thank you to Dan's family for honoring us with at this little gathering. We, you know, Jane primarily put it together in such a short time, and so we don't have a fancy formal lineup of what's going to happen, except to give ourselves an opportunity to come together and share warmth and love and food and stories and fire and ceremony. On Monday morning, I told Marie David that I woke up and just for no clear reason did a ritual with what we call mpepu, sage, clearing the air and speaking with my ancestors. And then later, when I got the message from Marie that Danny had passed, it just made so much sense. So the following day in the morning, I got up and did a proper ritual. And us in the tradition, we ask our ancestors for permission to speak to the person who is leaving. And in no time at all, Danny was in the room, and he just had this broad smile on his face, and it made my heart so happy. And just behind him, and very sort of quiet, was Joe. And I just sat there with the two of them in the room and spoke to Danny for a long time about what he meant in my life. And, you know, just like what Cynthia was saying, when you were even thinking about maybe doing some moral shortcuts, you just had to take one look at Danny and you would change your mind. He was such a presence when it came to integrity and doing the right thing. So I want to give the people in the room here an opportunity and an online opportunity to just talk about Danny, to just share with us some stories that they would like to talk about at this time.
Yes, Sylvia.
Yes.
It's Hamlin. Can I go first, because I may have to jump into a meeting at 12:30 at 1:30 my time.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you so much. You know, it's I always remember Dan as at the heart and soul of Dan is that of a poet. I've always thought of that, you know, just the way he spoke, his thought process. You know, there's always a soulfulness I always admired with Dan. But also, you know, that directness. that no bullshit way that Dan had, I thought it just admirable, and you knew where you stood with Dan, and there was no beating around the bush. Um, and that's admirable, considering the work that we were doing in journalism. Sometimes there are always that shading and those games that people play in this business, and Dan never played that game. And so I really admire that. One thing I will share with you is that um, I was so happy that I was part of the process that rewarded Dan's contribution to journalism by him being awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award. I was from the Canadian Journalism Foundation. I was part of that jury, and I've got to tell you, his name was not in anybody's list, but yes, he was nominated, but I pushed for that, and I pushed for his recognition because a lot of people said, "Well, who is this guy?" You know, and I made the case, and I changed people's minds, and I think it was well deserved. It was the right thing to do, and the recognition that Dan and the work that Dan has done in journalism, not just here in Canada, but around the world, and certainly in South Africa and other African countries. So I was really really pleased that he got that award, and I think he was very pleased as well. Yes, he's a very humble man, never bragged about what he did, but I think he knew that he had the goods. He knew where he stood, and he was really good at what he did, and I think he was very proud of that. And I can say that I'm just really honored to have been part of Dan's circle, if you will. He didn't suffer fools lightly, and even among his friends. But I think there was something about Dan that was authentic and just real, and I'm just gonna miss him. I really am. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts about Dan. There's so many, and I'll stick around to hear as many as I can before I leave. But thanks so much for doing this. What a great guy. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamlin. Okay, we can stay with online or come back to the room. And anybody at all, just feel free to unmute and please just share with us.
I just wanted to echo some of what Hamlin said about so much of what he said is so true about Dan not suffering fools lightly, even among his family. He had that very direct approach, which was it could be off-putting, but something at the same time that you needed to hear. And he did that with family, and it's interesting that he did that in his work, because that doesn't always translate very well in a work environment. But it's interesting that that's one of the traits of his personality that people remember most about him and value. Because I think in media, especially recently, there's so much BS going on. There's so much kowtowing, so much caving in to politically correctness, or not making waves. And Dan he wanted to make waves. He wanted to knock down walls. And these walls still need to be knocked down. So it's very special and very appreciated that he was recognized with that award when he was alive to receive it, because so much of that happens after a person passes. And I'm so glad he was able to receive it while he was still around with all of us. So thank you for being part of that.
Thanks, Marie. I just want to say that, you know, listening to Hamlin talk about the lobbying to influence people and get that award to Danny reminded me so much of just what we managed to achieve, these small groups of people, the Canadians and the South Africans, just pushing and achieving amazing things. And I just have to say, this is such a rare opportunity to have Danny's family, his friends, his colleagues, and everybody in the room together to experience how much power one person has when they use it correctly and when they understand their power. I remember one time I was in Canada with the Canadian Association of Journalists. It was their 20th anniversary. And Danny, Hamlin, Cynthia, Tim Knight, everybody was there. And I didn't quite understand why the CAJ would choose a Black woman from Africa to come and talk to them as their keynote speaker on their 20th anniversary. But then when I watched how these guys operate, I understood. It's exactly what Hamlin was saying. Nobody knew who I was before they decided that this is what's going to be done and that we have to get this journalist from Africa to come and speak to you guys. And I remember Danny sat right at the back of the room that day, and I was really nervous because I didn't know what to say to these big deal people. And afterwards, he came up to me and he said, I sat right at the back of the room and you could hear a pin drop. People were so engaged. And at some stage, somebody tried to clear the plates, he said to me, and people got really irritated. And just those few sentences were so comforting that he, you know, understood that I was nervous and that I would be comforted by this. But the thing that stays with me to this day is afterwards we had a panel and a discussion forum, and there was some Q&A afterwards, and I was on the panel with some Canadian journalists. And there was one mic and a long queue of people waiting to ask questions. And one woman was right at the back. She was literally last. When it was her turn, she finally came to the microphone and she said, the question was for me. And she wanted to know what happens to people when they go to South Africa, because all of these people, Danny, Tim, Cynthia, everybody, Marie Wilson, all came back changed when they came back to Canada. And they all came back just fanatic about South Africa and what was happening here. And I was so touched because she was only half joking. So I just want his family to know that the connection that we have with Danny in South Africa is truly, truly special. So I'm going to ask people in the room maybe to pick up on that.
Sure.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. It's absolutely fabulous that we're honored to have the family on this Zoom meeting. It's absolutely phenomenal. Sylvia said a lot, Basil has said a lot as well, and I can really echo all these sentiments. I mean, Dan was a quiet, unassuming, but very deep and gentle warrior. And together, we broke down the walls of apartheid in journalism. And to this day, there are so many of the trainees, Dan's trainees, etc., who are, you know, living the legend that we dreamt of. So thank you very much for giving us Dan. Thank you very much for allowing him into our space. I believe there are a couple of broken hearts as well. There was this very handsome, unassuming, very firm, very principled, very ethical, marvelous, beautiful, warm, wonderful human being And I know some in my family as well, you know, fell over head over heels in love with him. So he was amazing. His memory will remain, his legacy will remain, and we are the beneficiaries of his principles and ethics that he incorporated into our profession. So thank you very much. It is an honor, but his legacy will live on. It's very difficult to talk about Dan in the past tense because I think his presence is enormous, and I feel he's not too far away from where we are at the moment. As Sylvia had already alluded to, I think his presence will remain. So thank you very much, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Oh, I need some notes. So. Hi, everyone. It's Jane Lippman here. I'm really, really honored to be part of this and to be here to be on this Zoom with Dan's family. That is so touching and so meaningful to us. And I feel a bit emotional again. Anyway, I first met Dan in 1990 when I was a journalist at CBC. And had just arrived in Canada, and suddenly the Ochre crisis happened. And I was at CBC The Journal, and I was told I had to get hold of somebody from inside the treatment center or somebody to talk about what was going on. And so I worked on it, and you know, there was this armed standoff going on, and I somehow got through to a number in that treatment center in Gamasatake, and the person who answered the phone was Dan David, and we connected, and we managed to sort of find an understanding, and he was able to give his side, the First Nations side of the story of what was going on the Journal at that time in 1990. And, you know, that's when we first met, and his voice was so important. It was so important. And I suddenly realized, because I just arrived in Canada, that it wasn't this place of multiculturalism and everybody getting on, and you know, the thing that had been promoted, and that you know, there was the horror of what was going on. And I did many films subsequent to that, and I worked with a guy by the name of Jeff Bear, who's in Maliseet, and he's in British Columbia. And yeah, so anyway, I just want to say to you guys, I did other films with First Nations people, and what Dan stood for was extremely meaningful and extremely important in the world today, and that what he represented, his warrior spirit and who he was, we need so much more of that. So go well, Dan, go well into the spirit world, and we hope your beliefs impact on other generations. Thank you. I've got more to say, but that was the main bit. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jane. Okay, now we're going to go back to everybody online.
Okay, well, you want one of us to say something? Yeah. Okay. I wanted to follow up on what everyone has said by saying that there was a price to be paid for the kind of courage and honesty and take no prisoners approach that that Dan had. I think I'll be saying has for a while, but anyway, that Dan had, and that he displayed so so well and so strongly in his career. So having worked with him at the CBC for years and years, and listening to him talk, but also knowing how he felt about certain things, I recognize actually in him what I recognize in Hamlin, who's my husband, which is that honesty, and knowing that by being so honest and so courageous and speaking up for what is right, that you will pay a price. I think there are certain opportunities they didn't get. There are certain probably certain spaces that Dan was not invited to because of it. And that's what you do when you're a pioneer and you're up against an establishment that doesn't see the world the way you do, and you're determined not to just go along. And so I know that Dan paid that price, but I never heard him express regret for paying that price. I worked with him in fact, he honored me by asking me to come in and train his leadership team when he first started the news division at APTN. And it was wonderful to see Dan in that kind of leadership role that he was so ready for, but had not been offered those opportunities in mainstream media. And to see the way he dealt with the people in the room, and also to see the way how his knowledge of both worlds, because to some extent, I mean, it was bringing stories from First Nations communities and the news to a large audience that went far beyond a First Nations audience. And so I just want to say that he came into his own at the APTN, and later on, when you saw him in his role at Ryerson as chair of diversity in the journalism department at Ryerson University as well. And I was one of the people who made the decision to ask Dan to go to South Africa. It was Les Lawrence and Tim Knight and myself. And we wanted him to go because of everything that he brought, including that quiet leadership, that morality about what was right and what was not right. And we felt that if there was anybody who would be able to understand what South African journalists, especially journalists of color, were going through at the time, it would be Dan. So I want to let his family also know that he played a very big and meaningful role in the life of journalism in this country. And Hamlin, I was there with Hamlin as he was trying to build the case for Dan when nobody else on the jury knew him, and helping Hamlin to collect all the material and to make the most persuasive arguments. And actually, I came to know more about Dan than I had known through that process. So Dan has been one hell of a guy, and he gave so much to all of us. So thank you as his family for being here with us and celebrating his life and achievements with us.
Thank you, Cynthia. I must say, when we started working with Dan in South Africa, one has to remember that South African journalists and South African people in general had been living with apartheid for 40 years. And before that, South Africans had been living with colonialism for almost 400 years. And so, to be quite honest, I didn't really believe that we could take over the SABC, And so when a few of us were sitting in a room in the CBC in Toronto, and all of these training officials from the CBC, one by one, is saying, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, I just sat there thinking, do you know these Afrikaners we are up against? We can't just walk in there. We're like 10 people here, man. And just take over this corporation of 5,000 people. You must be crazy. But at the back of my mind, there was a feeling that said, just let's go along with this and see where it goes, you know. Let's just go along with this and see where it takes us. But then I got to know these people, and I got to know Danny, and the things they were teaching us was just simple. Just tell the truth instead of doing what has gone before. And this week we managed to talk with a colleague at the SABC who is here, Angie, and put up a tribute to Dan on the SABC site. And writing that tribute and seeing it go on the site really made me think right back to that time where I didn't think it was possible. So I'm going to ask Angie just to say something about the SABC now and the tribute. But I'm going to read you one of the messages that we've been getting from people. And I think Jane also has some messages. Mm-hmm. This one is from a guy called Paul Barnsley. Mm-hmm. And it says, "Thank you for your tribute to my dear friend, Dan David. It's been a hard day, but your words made it a bit easier. I am a white person who somehow ended up spending the last 33 years in Indigenous-owned media in Canada. I credit Dan with helping me survive those early years. You captured his spirit perfectly. Strange, but I was going to call him today to ask his advice on a story lead. I already feel a great loss. But I am proud of my friend for his contributions in your country and in mine. He spoke of South Africa with great love. Take care." And the person who helped us put up that tribute on the SABC website this week is Angie Kapelianis, and she says it's been really well received.
Hello again, everyone. So long story short, as I said in the introduction, I didn't know Danny, but I've been in public broadcasting, public service journalism for, I think, going on 36 years. Started straight from varsity in Grahamstown, which is now called Makanda in South Africa, and landed up getting selected as one of 2 young women to go to Namibia and do 1 year of Namibia's, Southwest Africa, Namibia, kind of going into independence and democracy. And that really paved the way. I spent 3.5 years there, and it was phenomenal. It really paved the way for me coming back home. They did want to invite me or accept me as an honorary citizen. I traveled with President Sam Nujoma, learned everything about democracy, liberation politics, and then had itchy fingers and itchy feet about coming back home because the politics in South Africa was changing so quickly. This was around about 1992. And I'd wanted to go to, I think John Mattison might, if he's still on, might be a natural segue after me. I had not wanted to go work for another state broadcaster turning public broadcaster. I thought I'd done my share, but that was not my lot in life. And eventually I landed up at the SABC, and I thought, oh my God, we've got to do another apartheid broadcaster conforming and changing into a democratic broadcaster. But it was the best thing. I thought I knew everything, and I was young. I was 22, 23, 24, 25, and little did I know, I didn't know much. But as I said, when the guys from CBC came over to South Africa, and there were a string of them. There were CBC guys, NPR, ABC from Australia, BBC, and we were just so blessed to have the international world caring about us and wanting to contribute and help shape democratic journalism in South Africa. And I've always had the greatest respect for CBC and all the guys that came from CBC, because it was always about storytelling and telling the truth and being honest. And I'm still known to this day for having my compass facing north, the needle facing north. But yeah, so to come back to Sylvia, when Tim Knight passed away, and there's Amina sitting quietly in the corner, between the two of them, they're like, can we do something? And of course you can do something. So the digital team at SABC now falls under me. I've always done radio, loved radio, journalism, narrative, and kind of specialized in that. But I've now got the digital team with me. And what do I know about TikTok and X and Facebook and AI and all these things? But we're learning. And quietly behind the scenes, they'll say, please, can we write an article? And I say, of course, yes. So Tim Knight's name loomed large. Danny's name has loomed large. And the one editor that reports to me is the digital news editor. And she said to me, did you read Sylvia's article, opinion piece? And what did you think? And so I said, of course I read it. And yes, I checked it. And yes, I did the spell check. And then she went and changed it to version 2. And she says, but it's very long and it's very personal. And I said, that may be the case, but you know what? We'll end up eulogizing so many people in South Africa that I've never heard of, that have never made a mark. And be it Tim Knight and or Danny, they were instrumental in their way, and the public didn't know them in South Africa, didn't need to know of them. But what they did for us and what they did for our journalism was phenomenal. And I take great pride and courage and strength from knowing that there were people like Danny that were just instrumental. There might have been others that didn't connect and find the dots and join the dots, but they loved me and I loved them. And as the world changes with journalism, and it's faster and it's less meaningful and it's instant and it's now and it's less memorable, I think there's a greater reason why we need to remember that people connect through stories, and we are stories. And even if we don't know each other, there's the universal connection, the human being to the human being. So thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Jane has got something that she'd like to read from Jeff, but before she does that, is there anybody online, especially his family and the younger people, who want to say something personal about Danny, their connection with Danny, a story they'd like to share?
Okay, me again. I guess I'm talking a lot today. I just wanted to touch on one thing that was brought up earlier about Danny paying the price for being so direct and being so, like, let's tear down those walls. He did pay a price. I know that when after the crisis in our community, Kanasadaga, just because he was behind the lines and he wasn't reporting because he was too close to the situation. He never talked about it really, but he was hurt by it. I know this, but CBC kind of blackballed him for a while because of his mere presence in the community. And so I just wanted to bring that up and make that known. The other thing, a philosophy of Danny's, which I have yet to really fully embrace, because I'm the kind of person that goes from point A to point B. Danny always says, when you're out, take a left turn once in a while. You never know where it's going to take you. And that was his philosophy in life. Take a left turn. There's surprises there. There's stories there. There's contradictions there. And that'll open up the world to you. So that's one of his philosophies. And I think I hope I can get out of my point A to point B way of living and be more of the left-hand turn kind of person as I move forward. A little more adventurous, a little more unpredictable. So that's all.
Thanks, Marie. Thanks very much. one of the most adventurous things I've ever done was go with Danny to a barbecue in Ganisatagi. And I remember meeting quite a few of his family members there that day. And the thing that strikes me is that everybody was outside in short sleeves and I was freezing. And they were telling me that this was summer and I disagreed strongly, but there was no getting away from it. We had to be outside around the barbecue and whatever. And I decided that day that I don't care what happens in South Africa, that's where I am staying. Jane would like to read just a little extract from what one of Danny's friends and ex-colleagues has sent her.
Hi again, everybody. I'm just going to read to you a message from, if I can just find it, sorry guys, from Jeff Bear, who's in British Columbia. He says, I'm so sorry I couldn't, I'm hoping he's actually on the Zoom, but I'm not sure. But he says, I'm so sorry I couldn't be with you via Zoom. I am there in spirit. I've heard from a mutual friend with confirmation of Dan passing. The news will soon trickle out across the land, and the full impact of this loss will span the nation. He had an impact on our growing community of Indigenous journos. Perhaps he is responsible for its exponential growth. I am so moved by your tribute to him, Sylvia, very respectful, and one could feel the love. I knew Dan at the time he felt dead, buried by the strong colonial shackles that tried to confine us all, to be included in and respected by the Canadians of white journalism. It's as if we were in a diaspora, even though we were swimming upstream in the river of life, breaking the current with our determination, our stubborn dedication to truth-telling. Jane will tell you of my own struggles working in the primetime current affairs show, The Journal. Some people considered me a single-purpose producer, confined, consumed by my own history, an Indian with a chip on his shoulder, a moniker I wore with pride. Throughout that time, Jane was at my side. She even tried to make me an honorary Jew. Anyway, that's another story. I can't remember doing that, but anyway. I thought it was funny and lovable. Jane was a sister to me at the time. Dan had been living with my partner and I at the time. She assisted to his partner, Lynn. Eventually he disappeared. He was enigmatic and distant. Sometimes he was an iceberg floating across a warming ocean. Eventually the earth began to shift and I left the CBC shortly after the passing. I left everything behind. One day he showed up in Vancouver around 1996. I think he referenced his time in South Africa, but then he vanished again, like a trickster he sometimes was. I will share more memories, but anyway, my love to you all, Jeff Bear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else here?
Hi. I've listened with interest about paying the price. And I never knew him. As I said, I'm Jane's partner of 9 years. And both Jane and I have backgrounds where our parents were very much involved in, some people would say, paying prices. But for the family, the flip side of paying the price is dignity. Dignity. I didn't know him, but I can only imagine that on the scale, the dignity preserved, restored, far outweighed the price. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Alexi. And I just feel I should add that Alexi's family, South Africans, owe a huge debt of gratitude to his family. Alexi's father, George Bezos, was Nelson Mandela's lawyer. Okay, anybody else online? We kind of winding down
Yes.
in a few minutes.
Yeah, I'd like to add something. I'm Kristen, his niece. I've listened to all your stories. They're great. It just shows the love you guys have for my uncle. Excuse me. The last thing you read about him hopping in and out, it's very true. I remember my uncle just being everywhere. And I'll share with you through my healing or trying to. I wrote a poem for my uncle. And it's I named it Uncle Dan. I put a man of many words, witty and clever, living in our hearts now and forever. You traveled the globe, yet always came home. Your love our anchor, wherever you roamed. We cry through our pain and wipe tears away. Our family's hero who quietly showed us the way. Jumping on your bicycle made your day brighter. Your spirit a guide, our memories lighter. Like Dudama and Dudapa used to say, never say goodbye, only see you later. So I'd like to share that with you because you knew my uncle so well. He was an open spirit, giving, humble, loving, in a quiet, strong warrior way. And I thank you for all the kindness you ever showed him. It's immense. You know.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Alexi spoke of dignity, but you know, the flip side of the pain and the price that you pay for standing up in the world. And the dignity also is accompanied by magic. I remember one day going with Dan to a special ceremony in Ganisitagi. Basil and I were there, and Baba Louis had been part of organizing it. And it was held outdoors in a kind of forest. I don't remember exactly where, but I do know that the day before and on the morning of the ceremony, it was pouring with rain. And I remember thinking, back home in South Africa, we would cancel things if it is raining so hard. We would not go out there in all that weather, right? But Canadians are not intimidated by weather. So we went to the clearing and we started, and people were there with the Five Nations Iroquois flag. And Baba Louis had made sure, I don't know where he got it from, but he managed to secure a huge new South African flag at the time so that we could also carry our flag. And we were very, very proud. And the most amazing thing that happened, that as people started drumming and walking in a circle in this clearing in the forest, the rain stopped and the clouds parted, and there was this circle of clear sky, but just above where the ceremony was happening. All around, further away, was still the gray skies and the rain. And that clear sky remained for the whole, because the ceremony lasted for many, many hours through the day. And it stayed like that all the time. And I just remember thinking that this is nothing short of magic. And so, things like that, being with Danny and on such special occasions, really helped me to understand the power of people getting together with wonderful and noble intentions. Is there anybody else online who would like to say something? We're going to, we can leave the laptop on, but we're going to go and have some food and have some drinks and stand around the fire and carry on comforting ourselves and talking about Danny and sharing love. I do notice that John Mattison hasn't said anything. And for everybody who is online, John Mattison was absolutely instrumental in getting the Canadians to come and train us in the early 90s in South Africa. And that training was a huge watershed in South Africa in the fight against apartheid, but also in the fight for democratic journalism. So if you could really say something, John, it would be great.
Thanks very much. I didn't know Dan as well as some of you, but he came to dinner at my house a couple of times, and I kept in touch with him through the process. And I saw the impact he had on all the people he trained. The only other thing I wanted to say was I didn't just get CBC. I did go to the States and get NPR. And some of you may know Ira Glass from NPR, who's very well known there. And I brought him here, and I went to Australia and got people from the ABC, and a few from BBC. But there is no doubt that the CBC made the biggest impact. And the one thing that did happen was that obviously it sounds simpler than it was at the time, because at one stage I was called into an office and there was someone from the American embassy who said they want Voice of America to come and be part of it. And I said, well, no, that wouldn't fit with South Africa's democratic principles, because Voice of America is a state broadcaster, and it falls under the State Department, so that wouldn't be appropriate. And I had no authority. I mean, Sylvia's talking about the fact that we walked into the SABC with no real power or anything, and sort of and made things happen. And in that case, they accepted it, and Voice of America never came. I know there are good reporters at Voice of America, I don't dispute that, but we just wanted to establish the principle, which had been such hard work to get that far in South Africa, to say that now we're an independent public broadcaster and we don't fall under a government mandate with a government policy, political policy over us. Yeah, no, it's I'm glad to be part of this and reflect on it. Dan was always quiet, but he made an impact. There's no doubt, and it's really lasted, as you see. I mean, it's now 30 years since my first trip to Canada to meet up with him. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you very, very much. Is there anybody else online who would like to say, or anybody else in the room who would like to say something? You're right. Okay. As I said, we've sort of come to the end of this tribute and celebration of Danny. Marie, yes?
Yes, I just wanted to ask if either Gawis Riyahne or Thaioronióhte could say something on behalf of the family in Ganyak-Gahaga.
Please.
I guess before I get off too, I'm going to say, I think throughout my life, like I remember the first time I seen my uncle on TV, and it blew my mind, because a lot of times we don't see our people. My name is Jacob, by the way. I'm his nephew. You don't see, back in the day, our people represented on TV or in any kind of media. So I remember seeing on there, and it did bring a lot of pride to us and really changed the outlook. But you know what? Also, knowing him, it was like you're right, how he didn't suffer fools. He stuck to his morals. I remember I started an alpaca farm and I had made this logo for my farm and t-shirts. And I offered him a t-shirt and he said, nope, I don't wear anything with logos. But uncle, it's me. I'm not Nike. But he said, no, I don't wear logos. So he stuck by his principles. And that's what I loved about him. And the other thing I found hilarious, I remember one day I brought my goat over to visit him and show him my goat. And he mentioned how he wanted to eat him. And I'm pretty sure he wasn't joking. So those are the things I'm going to remember about him, is his love for life. Even at the end, you know, he knew the outcome of his decisions, but those were his decisions. He lived by his own rules and he would go out the way he wanted to go out, and that's what he did. And I respect him and love him for that.
Thank you. And I think that's a fitting way for us to end. I just want to say thank you to everybody, all the South Africans gathered here and everybody online, especially Danny's family. And one last short story. In recent times, I donated to his fundraising for children with cancer and his bike rides, and sent a donation. And he sent me an outraged email saying, why did you do that? The exchange rate is terrible for you. I was so amused. It wasn't even a big donation, but in typical Danny style, he decided I shouldn't be using South African rands to send him money for a bike ride fundraiser in Canada. But that's just how he was, always caring about people to the finest detail. So thank you, everybody. We're going to have a small celebration for the rest of the evening. And we, you know, all of us would really, really love to be at that funeral, to come and formally say goodbye to him. In fact, the other night, I found myself lying in bed, looking online at flight prices. And I saw, oh my word, the return ticket to Canada isn't that expensive this time of the year. And then I remembered all my other financial issues and just turned off the app and stopped dreaming. But our hearts will be there, and please let us have the details. And this recording we will circulate for everybody and make sure that everybody has it. So thank you, everybody, and goodbye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Go well.
Sorry, Hamlin, we just were wrapping up.
No problem. No, I just finished my meeting and I thought I would just get a tail end. You know, Marie, I'm so happy to meet you. Okay.
Great. I'm glad you could get the tail end, and thanks for joining. And I think, you know, it's just what we all needed. We just definitely needed
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, I think so too. Good. Okay. Well, thanks for organizing all of this, Sylvia, and the whole lot of you over there in South Africa. You're a bunch of warriors, a bunch of shit disturbers. I love it.
Yeah, we get withdrawal when there isn't any trouble.
I know. You got to make trouble, create trouble, you know. So great to see Basil as well, you know.
Lovely to see you.
You got the signature hat. I love it.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
All right. But take care, everyone. Okay. Thanks again. Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Okay,
Bye.
Bye.
But I always had this thing that Danny's gonna come back one last time.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's here tonight.
Wow.
Danny, thank you for coming to say goodbye to us. Thank you for having South Africa so deep in your heart. And thank you for coming to help us at a time to do things that we thought were impossible. And It wasn't that you were some kind of magician. It is just that you did what you knew was right at the time when it needed to be done, and you stuck to your guns. You never ever deviated from what needed to happen. So thank you for that, and thank you for the love, and go well. And as we say in South Africa to comrades who are passing on, Hamba Kashle, comrade. Thank you. Gangans.
Danny, thank you very much for guiding us, for helping to find our moral compass. Thank you for your values that you imparted to us and for generations to come. Thank you for your life. Thank you for being there. Thank you for all the love, and Hamba Kashle.
Danny, I remember your voice so well when I was phoning you and you were in that treatment center in Oka, and I was talking to you and you were talking to me, and we got you out to a nation to explain what was happening for Mohawk First Nations people, and it was so powerful, and you were powerful, and your values and your views on the world were important. So thank you for that, and go well into the spirit realm and stay with us. Thank you, Danny. I can't drink this.
You can.
Danny, thank you. Thank you for everything, but most importantly, thank you for bringing your truth to us. You are a real man. You are authentic. So thanks for bringing your truth and help us make and help us realize our truth. So go out there and keep dancing. Thank you.
Whoa.
Thank you for your spirit, and to everyone that walked this world with you. Thank you for sharing everything that you had, that you knew, that we needed to know, that we needed to be remembered and reminded of. Thank you to Jane, Sylvia and Amina for bringing us together and for reminding us and for making this so special. Thank you, Basil. Thank you, Alexi. May you protect us, may you bless us wherever you are, and may we remember how special we are and actually how powerful we are.
Hamba Kashle kuntu
I've had reports of you, and thank you for bringing us together this evening to reflect on your life and for me to understand. And most of what I've understood is through Jane, not just now, but over many years of Jane speaking of you. can't.
It is open.
It is open.
You just have to put it to your mouth.
Huh?
Just put it to your mouth.
Yeah. Hambagatle, and as we say in Greek, we say imnini. I mean, your memory lasts forever. Whoa.
And now somebody has to do the toy toy.